Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 204 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melissa Lieberman, and today I am so excited to introduce you to Sarah Macaulay. She is the principal consultant, managing partner, and owner of Kindred Strategic, which is a consultancy that works with oil and gas, renewables, and software companies to help them to grow their own businesses. And today I wanted to interview Sarah because she is stellar at relationship marketing. She is so good at meeting potential clients and other people in the industry and turning those into revenue streams, whether it's direct clients for her own business or referrals and connections that she's able to ultimately monetize. And she walks us through how she does this and how she thinks about it to help you with creating hopefully a stronger practice of relationship building and having those relationships turn into revenue for you in some form or fashion. So I'm really excited for you to meet Sarah. She's originally from Scotland and shares with us just the way she thinks about marketing and networking and relationships. And I can't wait for you to hear from her because of the expertise that she has and will hopefully help you to either implement a stronger relationship marketing element to your consulting business or to optimize one that you've already got in place. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Sarah. Today, I'm so excited to welcome one of my clients, Sarah Macaulay, to the podcast. And we're going to be talking about one of her superpowers, which is relationship marketing. And for a lot of us as independent consultants, this is the bread and butter of our lead gen strategy, is building relationships and building trust and expertise and creating that sought after reputation for the type of work that you do. And this is something that Sarah is incredibly skilled at, and I'm excited to welcome her to the podcast today. So with that, let's dive in, Sarah, and start with an introduction to yourself so the listeners can hear a little bit about your background and what you focus on as a consultant, and then we'll dive in from there.
So I'm Sarah Macaulay, and it's Kindred Strategic. We are a growth consultancy, so helping companies who they're at an inflection point of some description, whether that's in terms of having a new market they want to come into or having a new product. So market research all the way through to marketing planning, branding. We act as the outsourced marketing and strategy function for our clients and connecting people together as well. So trying to find solutions through bringing lots of experts together and expertise that we might not have in-house.
Let's start off with just setting a good baseline, Sarah. Tell us, what does relationship marketing mean to you?
Do you know something? I think I said this to you. I had to actually look it up because I was like, is that what I do? I think it's seeing everybody as a person, as opposed to seeing people as clients or friends or family. It's that everybody is a whole person. And if you approach everything with that view of how can I help somebody, whether that's something that you do or potentially somebody else that you can introduce them to. So for example, when I introduce people to you, then that is how I approach things.
Yeah. And so it comes so naturally to you, at least from my vantage point. Do you agree with me? Does it feel natural to you? Is it a natural inclination? Has it always been, Sarah?
No, well, has it? I know that's a funny thing, actually. So I think when I went from being on client side into my first role in an advertising agency, it was all about networking. And I think I said this to you, I hated the word networking, didn't want to do networking. Because it felt a bit like sales, which I didn't really want to do either, which felt very transactional. And there was this wonderful lady I worked with, and I used to look at her and think, oh my gosh, how can I do what you do? And she said, it's all just about being interested in the other person and being more interested in asking them how they are than feeling like you have to tell them what you can do for them. So
Yeah.
that's where it came from. And then once you lean into that, it just becomes a lot easier.
And did you call it something besides networking? What did you start labeling it then?
So, well, in Scotland, we call it having a blether, which just
Oh,
means having a chat. And when I moved over here and I started doing what was business development, but I didn't really think about it that way for another company, the guy that I was doing it for said, just go and have a cup of coffee, just go and have a coffee and talk to somebody. And so I don't think I ever really thought about it as sales or relationship marketing I didn't really label it.
yeah. It sounds like taking away a label like networking or relationship marketing is what made it more successful for you because then it took the pressure off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, this is just in my head, right? But if you see it as a sale, which is transactional, it's not long term. Whereas if you see it as trying to get to know somebody, then there's lots of ways that you can help people. And, sometimes it'll lead to something financial and other times it won't. But if you see it as a long term thing, it's just much easier, I think.
Phenomenal. Sarah, how do you spell this in Scotland? Blether. Is it?
So Blether, blether.
Yeah, so it could be blethering, a new term that you've coined. We're blethering. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about now how you leverage relationship marketing or blethering in your business. What does it look like for you?
I guess it's sort of also the way my head works. So I've said this to you before. I've got ADHD and my daughter has the same. And one of the things about it, I think, is your brain works really fast. You can see my hands and everything are going. And I think it's trying to see connections between people. So seeing where somebody can add value to somebody else and where I can bring people together. And that's really how I use it. And I think working with you, you showed me how to actually create value out of that, as opposed to just doing it as a favor to somebody, but actually seeing that if you connect people together and that creates something for them, then you've been part of that value creation. So that's how I'm now trying to frame it.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about what that looks like then. So some of the work that you're doing is making connections and monetizing those connections as revenue in your business. And then in other ways, it's creating clients from those relationships. So tell us a little bit more, if we dive into each one of those, Sarah, what that looks like when you think about relationship marketing and deciding, is this something that I'm going to take on as a client or refer to other clients? A little bit more about what that process looks like for you.
I guess what I do is just see I'm just trying to think of how I do it really, is you see every opportunity to speak to people as just a chance to get to know them. And then usually what I try and do is, I suppose it's a bit of a gut feel, but it's, when you're listening to somebody, normally there's something that they will share with you. I think that whole thing about having 2 ears and 1 mouth, although like my husband wouldn't agree with that. He would say it was the other way around. But, that sort of, if you listen to them, usually they'll say something like, I would love to come. So for my clients, I really want to come to the US, but we really need some funding to be able to help. So that was something I was hearing a lot. So then when I went out into my own networking, I was listening for people who said, I help people get funding. And then by bringing them together, it then sort of releases them to be able to do all these other fab things like the marketing and everything that we want to do. So it's about trying to see where people that if you bring them together, it can solve a problem, whether you're the direct solution or whether you're just facilitating it.
Yeah. So, and the key that I hear, the words you've been using in our conversation so far are being inquisitive, being curious, being, really interested in the other person without so much of an agenda like you're describing, Sarah.
Yeah.
Wanting to really hear what their challenges are, whether you can solve them directly or through other relationships that you're building.
Yeah. And sometimes as well, there's nothing at all. I met this guy and we ended up talking about, it was actually about ADHD and, the challenges of having it and having children who've got ADHD. And, that wasn't at all a sales conversation. It was nothing to do with work stuff, although it was at like a business networking. It just happened to be a comment. But since then it has actually led to sales later on down the line because he's asked me to come in. Because I think maybe the thing that's really important is building level of trust. So not just about listening, but that they will trust you. And because they trust you, then they ask you for advice in lots of situations. So, for example, like I have a client who came to me and their problem is sales. It's not marketing. But then I know a sales lady. So they've trusted me to bring her in. And that solves another problem for them.
Yeah. And the more sales opportunities they get, then it feeds the process for you as well.
Yeah.
What do you think about Sarah, when you're talking with people? What are you thinking about as sometimes, we've got kind of two dialogues
Yeah.
going on in our head. And I'm curious if we can pull back the covers and hear about what you're thinking as you're talking to people.
Well, one of the things I do is not quite answering your question, but so I use mind maps, for taking notes as opposed to notes. And what I'll do is I will write down when I hear them say things, like words that they're using more than, great big long phrases. So if somebody said, oh, I'm really stressed. And then I'll sort of say, well, why are you stressed? I guess it's maybe a little bit part counselor, part relationship. So it's trying to hear what it is that's really, I don't know what's on their mind, what's top of their mind. And even asking, how can I help you? And then in my head, I'm thinking, do I know anybody else who's come up with an issue like that? Or do I know anybody in a similar position? Or do I know somebody who, if I introduce them, they might be able to help each other just by knowing each other? And I guess that's what's going on in my head.
Yeah. And when you think about, sometimes people are a little bit hesitant to ask that follow-on question. What makes you, they say that they're stressed, and then we think we shouldn't dig into that. That's off bounds. It sounds like that's not the way you think. So what do you think when you're asking people? I guess the word I'm looking for or trying to find in my head is like prying. It shouldn't be prying, that kind of thing. Some of us think that way and then others don't, and you don't. So tell us a little bit more about what you do think there.
So I guess I think if you say to somebody, so somebody says, well, I'm having a really bad day, I'm really stressed. And then I think, well, sometimes they actually want an opportunity to talk about it. So sometimes people don't want to, what it's like, you don't necessarily want to talk about it when you go home because you've got like your children, you've got your animals, you've got everything else going on in your life. And sometimes in your own business, you don't want to talk about it with your business partners because you're trying to work out what it is. So being like a trusted advisor for somebody means that you can ask them, what is it? But then if they seem a bit hesitant, I find if you sort of, it's like this, if you say to people, you don't have to tell me, you don't have to tell me, then it gives people the opportunity to say, well, you know what, it's fine, I don't want to talk about it. And it's a little bit the same with if you offer help to somebody, if you say, what I could do for you is this, but it's absolutely fine if you don't want to do that. Like, I think take the pressure off. So, if they want to tell you something, that's fine. And if they want help from you, that's fine. But if they don't, that's fine too.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like you think about yourself as a trusted advisor from the very beginning, even first met someone, even if you haven't yet built a relationship, which then creates trust more quickly and allows you to get deeper into a relationship more quickly, it sounds like, Sarah, versus sort of staying on the surface for some period of time and then thinking you've got permission to ask those deeper questions.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, it's not going to work for everybody, right? There's some people, I've met some people and you say to them, do you want to tell me about that? And they go, oh, no. So that's when I say, well, that's fine. But quite often what you'll find is even when they say no, like later on, they might come back. And I think it's taking pressure off people so they don't, personally, I think it's so they don't feel sold to, right? So, because people don't really want to be sold to, if they've got a problem, they want somebody to help them. And what I am learning is it's actually, well, from you, it's fine to charge people to help them, but it's not all, like we've gone back, it's not all transactional. And also, I think one of the big things I've learned since being independent is that I don't need to have the answer for everything, which is where this sort of come from. Because I think I felt for a long time, if you were going to go out and present yourself as like an expert, you should know all the answers to everything, but it's not possible. So I think when I sort of realized that it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is I've got like a whole load of people I can go and find out, and I will find out and I will come back to you, then it sort of freed me up as well, not to have to, in my brain, be trying to think about what the right answer is or how can I. Sometimes you're so busy trying to work out what is in your brain, you stop listening to the other person. So I just thinking, what, I'm going to take loads of notes, and when I have an idea, I'll come back to you, but I don't have to have the solution right now. It does take a lot of pressure off you too.
Yeah. The recipe we're building here from a relationship marketing perspective is kind of that as you were describing, the inquisitiveness, being really interested in the other person, and also freeing up your mind, trying to have a second conversation in your mind about how to prove to them you know what you're doing. Give yourself that permission to not know every answer. For me, I experienced that too, where thinking you need to have every answer, then wondering if you gave the right answer, and it just becomes such a gridlock in your mind versus freeing yourself up. I think that's such an incredible piece of this recipe, Sarah.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe it's like an age thing too, right? But you get to the point where you think, if you don't want to work with me, if you don't like me, if you don't think I've got the right answer, that's okay. Like, we're grown ups, it's fine. You don't have to. And then the minute you're like, it's fine. And there was a guy, I think I told you about this. There was a guy we'd done a proposal for, and then obviously we weren't the right thing, which is fine. And then he sort of didn't want to talk to me for the longest time. And then in the end, I went up to him at an event and I was like, hi. He was like, oh, I should have come back to you. And it's like, yeah, it's fine. We can still be friends. It's not a problem. And I think that as well just stops you from worrying so much.
Yeah. And making it comfortable for other people. Like you said, it feels more relationship based than it feels salesy.
Yes, especially if you're selling to people who are in like a similar role to you. So if you're going in, I've been in when I've been asked to go and do a proposal for a company, and it's for the marketing part of the company, and there's a marketing person in the job. I would feel the same way. It feels a little bit threatening, And so I think if you're aware of it and then you try and position it as, you're really busy, you've got so much going on, you've probably not got time to think about a load of these things. What can I do to help you? And then let's help you get to where you want to be and where the company wants to be. Then you're trying to win allies, really, rather than prove yourself.
Yeah. For them to have an ally versus a threat. Yeah. As you think about one of the strategies that I notice with consultants having a challenge with often is nurturing relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we can be really good at meeting people and having that initial conversation or meeting them at an event, but then nurturing that relationship. Tell us a little bit about what strategies you use, Sarah, and how you think about it.
So I would try to, if I met somebody at an event, hopefully you found out something about them that's relatively, like you've had a sort of a shared moment of something, whatever it is. So I met a guy at a Christmas event and he was talking about how, Christmas events, he was going to 4 or 5 of them. We were laughing, about how much turkey he was going to eat and everything. I'm like, oh, he was like, it's my business. So then if you've got that sort of a personal thing, when you go back to re-engage with them, replay what it is, like if you can replay something that you remember that they said, to show them that you think that spending time talking to them was valuable for you rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. And there is a little bit where I wasn't that good at getting the balance, but where you can give a little, to show. So, so saying, I knew somebody and he's from Florida, this guy. And I said, I know somebody there I could introduce you to. It is that sort of being open to trying to help people without it needing to be for some gain on your part.
Yeah. Walk us through, what does that look like? So you met the guy, let's use that as an example if you're game for it. You met the guy at a Christmas event, and then had a good chat with him. And then how did you turn that into the next conversation?
So I then followed up on an email and I sent him an email and said, I do know other people like sending voice messages. So I guess it's whatever works for you. So I sent him an email and I said, I hope all of your you didn't have like 5 different turkeys or something, and I hope it was great. And, here's the guy that I mentioned. And when you're back in town next, please let me know. And just remembering as well, I think remembering people and remembering to invite them to things. You don't have to do loads of stuff, but we have like a massive thing we do around offshore technology, OTC conference every year. So just trying to remember who's out there and inviting them. It makes people feel valued, right? That's what we all want.
Yeah.
Somebody to say, I remember you, and would you like to come along? And even if it's not, you've not done anything together, just feeling that you've thought about people.
Yeah. And then do you use any technology for this, Sarah, or is it all in the top of your head? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, CRM, which we have started, which is great. I'm not a real CRM person. I think it's just the way my brain works. But I do write a lot of notes to remember. But also when I'm putting contacts into, Outlook or wherever you're putting them, putting a little bit in about, where you met them and who introduced you to somebody, So for example, for when you have little kids, when you're little kids for ages, it's that so-and-so is William's mum, or right. It's Lucy's mum. It's not, you don't know the person. It's a bit like that. It's like, what are the trigger things and, what things are they interested in, so that it triggers it in your own brain when you meet somebody else who's maybe got either in the same industry or has got a similar need, or it's that giving yourself reminders.
Yeah. And being able to easily make those connections. Sometimes I give my brain more credit than it deserves that I'll remember. Yeah. I'm getting older than I want to admit. And so having those kind of notes can be really valuable. Like you said, in a CRM or just in Outlook or whatever works easiest. Tell us a little bit about the scenario where I hear this often too, where, I've let that relationship go cold, or I haven't talked to that person in a long time and I don't want them to think I'm now re-engaging with them because I want something. Tell us a little bit about how you think about that scenario and how you handle it.
I think there's a lot of value in being honest, right? So if you haven't spoken to somebody on a personal note, there's somebody that I haven't spoken to in a long time, and for no reason other than just life happens. And especially if you're at different stages, it's the same in business. And then if you just reach out and say, I'm really sorry, I really wanted to keep in touch, but life happens. But I was thinking about you the other day and it's made me wonder how you're doing. And I mean, you can make it more business like. You could say, I came across something and it made me think about you and your company, and I just wanted to touch in and see how you're at. Are you in town any point? Can we have a coffee? Just, I don't think you have to launch into can I sell you something? But just somebody being interested. And it's amazing how when somebody does that, to me, when they go, I was just thinking about you, that you're really open to, oh, well, we could have a call or we could, meet up. And then, yeah, you're just sort of, if you're honest about it, that this is life, because we know what it's like, right?
Yeah, it's crazy how you look ahead and it's been a few years and it doesn't feel like that. What advice would you give to someone who feels uncomfortable or inexperienced, or maybe they think I'm just someone who's not that good at relationship building? What advice would you give to them, Sarah?
Well, maybe you need to relabel it then as well in the same way I did. Maybe you need to think about it as something else. I really like, Blinkist. It's a little app that gives you synopsis of books. So I like to, if I've got a problem, I like to go or use AI to find out how do you do something, simple steps. And I think the thing is not to set ridiculous targets. So when I started doing the business development part of it, if I told you this or not, so with networking, I read a book and it was called Networking for Introverts. And it said when you go in to like a networking, don't say that you're going to meet 10 people and have like a fistful of business cards if that's not your personality. I mean, it's not mine. It was like, say you're going to meet even one person. You're going to meet one person. You're going to have a conversation with them where you ask them a couple of things about themselves, and you can get like questions that you can think about beforehand. And then once you've done that, that's a success. So anything else you do, it's just a bonus. But don't sort of try and change your personality overnight, or because that's not going to work. But set yourself little targets.
Yeah. And I think I like the way you've described this too, which is really isn't, we're not trying to jump ahead to, I'm going to come away with 3 leads. We're focused on the relationship part of this. And for some relationships, they might turn into a contract very quickly. They might never turn into a contract, or it may take a few years and we don't really know which conversation might be which one. And so just going into the conversations where, however, you're meeting people in a way that's just more focused on meeting the person and getting to know them versus wondering or worrying about where it's going to go.
Yeah. Because people, even if they're not going to be leads for you, they could quite happily refer business to you. Not everybody has to be a sale. And I think that's where, if you just focus on it, on trying to understand who they are and what they want, and just being interested in who they are, then quite often you'll find that there's something that you can do, even if it's not a sale.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that piece, Sarah. How do you ask for a referral? How do you kind of bridge that gap in a conversation or in a relationship?
No, I don't know if I actually do, to be honest with you. I think people just do. People just sort of try and refer me because they think I can help. I guess maybe the way I do it. So say, for example, I wanted to get into a business and I don't know. I'll try and find somebody who knows somebody in a business that I'm interested in. And I'll just say to them, would you mind introducing me to somebody? I'm trying to find out about X, Y, and Z. I'd really like to find out more about their company. Would you be open to doing that? But then you have to be prepared for them to say no as well. But most times people will actually give you an introduction. And especially if they know that you're not going to push them into a sale, but it's more about, I'm interested in this company.
Mm-hmm, right. So it's not about them. Yes. It's more about the company or the referral that you're looking for and the openness for them to say yes or no.
Yeah. So actually, I did have an example, not quite what you've asked, but so I phoned up somebody that I had done some business with, and then it had gone a bit quiet, and I phoned him up. And he said to me, oh, so what are you going to sell me today? And I said, actually, I wasn't. I was just going to ask, how your kid got on when they went off to college, because last time you were talking, they were moving into college. And he's like, oh, right. And then we started talking about that. And at the end, he said, oh, so, you don't want anything. And I said, no, but if I can help you with anything, let me know. And then he said, well, actually, I do have X, Y, Z. And then he asked for some help. So I think that was one way of getting around it. It's just if you care about more than what the sale is.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. You can see I'm not a business consultant because my mind's not sort of logical enough to answer.
And I think in part, Sarah, you don't have it in your mind that way because it's something that comes so naturally to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for many consultants, it isn't natural right now. And so for you to be able to describe the way you think about it
Yeah.
for another consultant, to the listeners to be able to start thinking about, okay, how do I do this? And then it becomes more natural over time.
Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot with this question, but I'm just really curious. What is the most unique scenario where you've introduced someone to someone else, or those dot connections that you were making? You do this all the time. I'm just really curious what stands out to you as one of the most unique that you've done so far.
Well, I guess that, and I've told you about this. So with Oklahoma, so fantastic. I was on like an online networking group. It was massive. And we all had to introduce each other. And then we had something in common, this guy and I, although we hardly spoke. And so I phoned or I sent him an email afterwards and said, if you want to talk about this offline, that would be great. Because it wasn't anything to do with business. It was sort of personal. And we ended up chatting. And then we did some work together. And then we were sat having a beer one afternoon and with some other people. And I said, Scottish businesses, it's a bit of a shame just with the market the way it is just now. We don't have funding. And he said, Oklahoma, where I live, we have funding. We're trying to bring people in. And we both sort of went, oh, that could be interesting. And then just by dint of him finding somebody who knew somebody, last summer, we organised the trip for the Lieutenant Governor of Oklahoma to come to Scotland. And he did a mission and he met a whole load of companies and we're bringing people together. And it's great. And it's that sort of, well, I just sort of think, if it's an opportunity, even if you don't know how to do it, you just figure out a way.
Yeah.
Actually, somebody here said to me, one of the things I like about working with me and then the other girl that works with me is you say yes first and then you work out how to do it behind the scenes. So if it feels right,
say yes in your mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's bound to be a way to make it happen,
Yeah. Which is incredible, Sarah. So let me just say this back to you. You just said you met someone online at a online networking kind of group and had a personal connection of some sort. Maybe did something stand out in the chat about this person or what they were sharing when they introduced themselves?
He mentioned that he had had a health issue, which is quite rare, and I had it. And he said, it's made me think about how I work differently and the balance of my life. So then I sent him a note afterwards and said, I totally know exactly what you mean. And if you want to talk about it, because I'm a few years on from you, let me know. And so he did. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And then that led to the connection between Oklahoma and Scotland.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, we had a dinner with the Lieutenant Governor in Glasgow on one of the golf courses. I mean, it was just, it was fantastic. So it's it's a wild one. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think so illustrates the point here, right? Which is you never know where something might go, but just being open to putting yourself out there, being willing for them to say no or leave me alone or I don't want to talk about this or ignore you. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, seeing the upside and where some magic could really happen, like you just described.
Yeah. And I think celebrating other people and their successes too, when somebody does something good, like saying, wow, that's really good, Yeah. And not seeing yourself in competition with everybody, I think that's something that's really helped me just to think, because if you think you're in, and maybe this doesn't work for everybody, but if you think you're in competition, then you start to judge what you're doing versus what they're doing, as opposed to trying to do what's the right thing to do. And I think when you just do what the right thing is, then, it's far more valuable.
Yeah. I think it also comes down to having an idea or a thought process that there's enough for everyone. There's enough for everyone at the end of the day. And so we're not all fighting over the same resources or the same clients or the same engagements. And if that is true, there's enough for everyone, then talking with people that could potentially be seen as a competitor or talking with people and it could be turned into such interesting collaborations or referral relationships or that kind of thing.
I mean, actually, I think the referral thing is great because there was another guy that I'm in networking, and he said, if I eat, you eat, and vice versa. And I was like, it's so true. It's, if I see an opportunity and you are better for it than I am, then that's okay. But it's also okay if you give me a little bit of that because that's what I did. And then next time it's reciprocal.
Yeah. Sarah, if you're okay to talk about this, because this is one of your superpowers, you've decided and been able to implement this referral process that you have and create it into a revenue stream for your business. So will you share a little bit about what that looks like and what that journey to start monetizing instead of doing these favors in a way that you weren't compensated for?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that was a mindset shift that you helped me with, because it was that if you think about the value you're creating as opposed to the cost. So it's a shift from what am I charging to what is the value. And I think that's actually, it's a much better way of approaching it, because you're thinking about, it sort of frees you. So you try and see, what are all the opportunities that you could offer, and seeing it in the context as well of helping somebody solve something for themselves. So for example, these companies that are coming from, outside of the US, and they want to do things, but they don't have funding, being able to connect them with somebody who can help them is really valuable, because they don't have those connections, but you do. So by facilitating that, you are allowing them to achieve what their goals are. And there should be some sort of recompense for that, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to come into the market. So that is more of a mindset, I think, than anything else.
Yeah. And so how were you thinking about it before, Sarah, when you weren't charging for those introductions and those referrals?
Well, do you know something? I remember seeing somebody on LinkedIn, and what they had put in was connector. And this was a couple of years ago. And I thought, I would love to do that. And then I spoke to a couple of people, and they said, oh, no, you can't do that. You can't really charge for connections and introductions. And then I thought, that can't be right. But I just didn't know how to do it. So before, what I was doing is I would help people, and I would do it for free, I suppose. Well, it was for free. And I did get business from that. But actually, it sort of hampered me growing my business, because that's the bit that I really love. So I had to be able to think of it as something that was valuable to be able to carry on doing it. Because, you were sort of saying, I could spend all my time doing it, but if you don't charge anything, that's not very great. You're not going to have enough to keep the lights on. So, yeah.
Yeah, which is incredible to be able to take what we love and then figure out, and in not every case you can charge for that, but in what cases does it look like a revenue stream for me, and then being able to focus in on that from an overall service portfolio.
Yeah. So the being out of your comfort zone as well. So I said to the girl that works with me, there's a whole load of Sarahs, I seem to have like a collection of Sarah, and one of them's there. And I said to her today, I said, she's something or other, I can't remember what it was. And I said, I would just really like to be in my comfort zone sometimes, just sometimes.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's not, because being out of your comfort zone means you're learning something new. And I think that's the other thing too. It's just being curious and learning new things and how to do new things, and being okay with not knowing how to do things,
Yeah. And figuring it out as you go. Yes, absolutely. Let's see, if you could give someone one actionable step today to improve their relationship marketing in their consulting business, what would you recommend to them, Sarah?
Listen and try and hear what they're saying, but also if you're meeting them in person, you can see as well, when they're comfortable or not. And this is the second bit. Sorry, I'm going to go for two. Right. So one, listen, do something that makes them feel valued or seen, and not in like a sort of cheesy way, but if somebody's wearing something nice, or if somebody's said something, or if something that they've mentioned about their business is really great, just say, wow, that is so cool. Can you just tell me about that? Because, I think sometimes everybody's so heads down, focused on what they're doing, that, you forget some of the stuff that they're doing, or they forget that some of the stuff they're doing is so fantastic, and you need somebody to recognize it and appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. That little step makes such a big difference in someone's day and in building a relationship with them.
When you introduce two people, because you value both of them, then it's like magic, because you're saying, I think you're great and I think you're great, and I'm going to introduce you together. And it just builds like this appreciation, and I think you're not just doing it to get sales, you're doing it to make people feel valued.
Yeah.
I don't know, that sounds a bit wishy-washy, does it? But I actually think, if somebody introduces you because they think that you're valuable, it gives you like a good feeling. And I think if you can pass that on, then you should do.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love making an introduction. In fact, I'm in the process of making an introduction to someone else to you at the moment. And I always love spending a little bit of time thinking about, okay, why do I think this is a valuable? What am I thinking about each of you that stood out that I thought it would be a good connection?
Yeah.
And I've had the value of your introductions and you do the same of really spending some time to say, this is why I think the two of you it might be valuable to connect. And receiving that, to your point, it really stands out of, that you're valuing each of those relationships and each of those people and hopefully the connection that they might create once they're introduced.
And doing a little bit of that as well also means when they talk, they've got something to say. So if people aren't as comfortable with other things straight away, if you say, oh, by the way, did you know both of your kids are at like A&M or something? Then it gives them, it's like an automatic, oh, we can talk about that. So you're making it easier for them too.
Yeah, which is another layer of value. Absolutely. Yeah. Sarah, thank you for being on the podcast today. As I mentioned when we started, you have such a gift when it comes to relationship building and relationship marketing, even though you don't think about it that way. That's one of the end results. And is there anything as we're wrapping up here that we haven't yet touched on that you'd like to share?
Well, and this is not ad for you, but I'm going to begin to do it anyway, is that I think you have to, as well as giving other people value, you have to value your own business. And for me, investing in your help was vital. And it's very easy to not do it, but actually it's very difficult to ask for somebody to value you if you don't value people in return, and if you don't value your own business and your own ability to create something that people need. So I think seeing if you've got a gap, it's really worthwhile understanding what the gap in your knowledge is. And if you can find somebody to help you, it's a much faster way. And absolutely pay for the help, because it gets you to where you want to go so much faster.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. It's such an honor to work with you and to call you a client and a friend, and to see where your business has grown from and to, and is on the trajectory to hit. So thank you. All right. As we wrap up, Sarah, if people are interested in reaching out to you, tell us what the best fit for you is as a consultant and where they can find you.
So probably just LinkedIn message, and it's Sarah Macaulay, and it's probably written somewhere because Macaulay can have lots of different spellings. And so on LinkedIn would be great.
If you were a boutique consultancy owner who's ready to take the next step in terms of marketing and branding and building a marketing ecosystem, Kindred Strategic would be a great resource to reach out to. We'll put Sarah's LinkedIn link in the show notes. And then also, if you've got consulting clients who are looking for a strategic marketing consultancy, and you may not provide that type of service, or you might be fully utilized and want to have a referral partner, that would be another reason to reach out to Sarah to connect with her and hear more about what she and her business do. Okay, we'll put the link in the show notes. Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate you being here, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.